The Alpha's Forbidden Mate, a paranormal romance audiobook. Prologue. Cassandra is 20 when she loses everything: her pack, her mate, her future, everything. It's a rather young age to have your life seemingly end, but that was the reality she faced. She had made her bed, so to speak, sold her soul to the devil with her eyes wide open. Or more accurately, she had made her wish and now had to live with the consequences. It's not like she hadn't been warned. Cass had been visiting the magician, asking him to grant her a wish. Since she was a child, he had always refused, or not exactly refused, for she had learned he couldn't actually refuse a client if they insisted on making their wish. But he had tried to change her mind, and had in fact succeeded multiple times over the years. But 3 days ago, she had gone back to the shop, that small, dark place people avoided looking at too directly as they passed it on the street. She had gone back desperate and determined, and this time she hadn't changed her mind. She had made her wish knowing fully well what the price would be. She just hadn't expected it to hurt so much afterwards. The pain was everywhere it hurt, having to leave home to say goodbye to her brother, to her packmates. She had grown up expecting to be their alpha, their leader. She had been someone who mattered, and someone who would matter now because of her wish, because of Sebastian. She was nothing at all, not even herself. One Cass's 8. When she decides she'll dedicate the rest of her life to making Sebastian Sax's existence a living nightmare. Sure, she is still young, but no amount of emotional maturity that might come with time could ever dull the unadulterated loathing she felt at the sight of his stupid mop of brown hair. Cassandra's own hair was the color of wheat, and its sparkled gold under the sun when it shone brightly in the sky. She took great pride in the fact that her mother had somewhat reluctantly allowed her to grow it long below her shoulders in thick curls that was nothing short of a miracle, for such an inconvenient hairstyle was generally forbidden among the members of their pack destined to be fighters. But while Cassandra was as powerful a fighter in the making as there ever was, she was also quite vain about her beautiful hair, which is why she hadn't taken well when Sebastian had stuck a piece of gum he'd been chewing for a suspiciously long time into it. In retrospect, what she hated even more was that she hadn't seen it coming, despite her parents warning her about Sebastian and his packmates. Cassandra and Sebastian's respective packs shared a border set deep within the woods, for once upon a time their two clans had been united as one. It had split decades ago when two wolves in line to become alpha had fought over the same mate, ending their friendship and any desire to remain part of the same whole. Thus, what had once been a powerful, thriving pack became two resentful halves that blamed each other for their woes. Cass, her brother, and their wolf mates enjoyed adventuring in the woods and often ran into children from the rival pack whom they naturally ended up playing with. But when she had innocently told her parents about these games, she had been vehemently discouraged from engaging with the other children ever again, for if they were anything like the other members of the Silver Pine Pack, whatever that meant, they weren't worth Cass's time, especially not Sebastian, who was the alpha's son. Cass had been taken aback at first, for she had quite liked Sebastian. He had shown her how to make much better skips with her stones and could build the best huts she had ever seen. However, since her father had sworn his daughter should be making better friends, had taken a new approach to justify her hangouts with the boy and his friends, which all came down to besting the other pack. And from then on, what had started as innocent fun between the children quickly escalated into more and more aggressive attempts to best each other. Nights were spent establishing strategies. Peers were briefed to put more focus and energy into the games, and everyone became seriously competitive. For there was no more room for errors when defeat was nothing short of unacceptable. On the day Sebastian put his gum in Cass's hair, the game had been one of tree climbing, the goal being to compete with the other team to see who'd reach the top more quickly. All participants' times would be accumulated, and the team with the lower score would win. Unfortunately, performances were looking incredibly tied, and it all came down to the two last contestants to determine the winner. Cass went first, reaching the top in record time, though to her great horror, Sebastian proved himself even more efficient when his turn came. So naturally, she did what any wolf would have done and made sure to distract him by throwing a small pebble at his back, leading the boy to miss a step, fall down, and lose the race. "That's cheating," Sebastian protested once he got back on his feet, unharmed, though there was never any real worry there, since he was, after all, a werewolf. Cast stuck her tongue out at him. "If it isn't in the rule book, it's not cheating." "We don't have a rule book," Sebastian argued. "Exactly. Now, don't be a sore loser and proclaim us the winners," Cass commanded, earning herself an eruption of triumphant screams from her packmates. She knelt down beside Sebastian, waiting for him to place a crown of twigs and flowers on her head, no higher honor existing in the children's collective minds. Instead, Sebastian spat his gum right on top of Cass's head, making her eyes widen in shock. "Sorry, it slipped," the boy smirked. Cass began to scream, trying to get it out, but only entrapping the gum within her curls further. Sebastian laughed, thinking the entire spectacle was highly entertaining, not only because it served Cass right for cheating, but also because he had never thought she'd get so freaked out about something as silly as her hair. Then tears welled up in Cass's eyes, her distress questions, and for all of 10 seconds he was suddenly very sorry for what he'd done. That is, until Cass threw herself at him, smacking him in the jaw. Then all hell broke loose. Cassandra would meet with the magician for the first time a month later, right after her 9th birthday. The first, though, far from her last 3. Cass is 11 when she finally gets her proper revenge. It's not like she hadn't tried before. Then there had been the stolen pet attempt, during which Cass and her brother had hidden away their own beloved hedgehog, sending themselves a kidnapping note signed by Sebastian, which forced the false culprit into publicly apologizing for something he'd never done. It was a rather good revenge, except Sebastian had immediately retaliated with something even better, making all of Cass's efforts null. He'd come up with a fake apology letter attempt, in which he'd written himself a note from Cassid, detailing everything she'd supposedly done wrong over the last few months, including faking a kidnapping, tampering with their pack's crops, and spreading rumors about Sebastian and his family. Sebastian's parents had been quick to believe all these made-up facts, a lot of which had been based on real hardships their pack had faced. They had confronted Cass's parents in a communal meeting, including other packs, which had degenerated into a full-blown shouting match, in the middle of which Cass had stood perfectly dumbfounded. These back and forth went on for 2 years, during which Cass would come up with some form of revenge, and an affronted Sebastian would retaliate with another better one, the circle never ending until Cass reached 11. That is, her 11th birthday marked Sebastian's 13th, and like every 13-year-old wolf in the region, Sebastian was set to compete against other shifters his age in a full-day hunt in the woods. This rite of passage took place every year, and everyone expected the young wolf who brought back the biggest, most impressive bounty to be awarded a prize, thus bringing great honor to his pack. In everyone's mind, there was no doubt this would be Sebastian the hunter with the most skills in this year's crop. Cass, not being old enough, wasn't set to participate, but this was her chance to finally get back at Sebastian, and she was determined to win, despite the odds. That's why weeks before the hunt, she visited the magician once more. Cass had entered Adrian's shop with all the determination of righteous fury, explaining how she wished for him to make her strong enough to win. "You're willing to risk losing your darling twin brother over this," Adrian had tusked. "I didn't take you for being this lazy. I'm not lazy," Cass had protested, clenching her fists. "Then why come to me with this request, when you could very well win this hunt by honing your skills the traditional way? I can't." Cass shut her mouth. She was about to say there was no way she could win by herself, She was younger, not good enough. Would it really be winning if you bested that Sebastian of yours? Because of magic, Adrian had observed Cass had gritted her teeth, but weeks before the hunt, she secretly obtained the plans for the event. She pored over them by night, memorizing every detail, every location where the game was likely to roam. By day, she'd shift into her wolf form and venture into the forest, mapping out the terrain, noting the tracks of deer and the denser, riskier trails where bears might roam. She trained herself to turn more quickly, to move quietly, to blend into the shadows, and leaves one crisp morning, her breath visible in the chilly air. Cassandra stumbled upon a bear. Her heart raced as she observed it from a distance, noting its size and the power in its limbs. Over the following days she tracked the beast while well in her human form, to not alerted of her scent, learning its habits and patterns. On the day of the hunt, Cassandra rose. Before dawn, her body tense with anticipation, she entered the woods separately, following the faint trail she had memorized, diverging from the path taken by Sebastian and the other young wolves. Her journey through the underbrush was silent, her heart pounding as she waited for it to appear. And then, with the sun just beginning to peek over the horizon, the battle took longer than Cass had anticipated, and overwhelmed with exertion, she caught herself thinking more than once that perhaps she'd been a fool taking on such dangerous prey. Perhaps she wouldn't be able to defeat it, and furthermore, perhaps it would defeat her. Was there any chance left for escape at this point? Only the thought of Sebastian winning the competition, should she not return with this bear to best him, kept her going, despite the burning sensation in her muscles and the fear racing her heart. She couldn't let Sebastian win, she wouldn't allow it. And this bear stood between her and her goal. This bear had to die. As she emerged into the clearing, dragging its massive body behind her, the crowd's reaction was instant. Stunned silence gave way to uproarious applause and cheering. She dropped her bounty at the center of the clearing, standing too tall, her chest heaving with exertion. The elders, including her own parents, exchanged shocked glances before the head. Elder stepped forward, his face a mask of reluctant admiration. He lifted the garland traditionally meant for Sebastian and placed it around Cassandra's neck in recognition of an unprecedented feat. He announced, his voice booming over the crowd, "We crown Cassandra as this year's victor." Cass hadn't expected the overall uproar her victory would cause, nor did she think she'd become somewhat of a local prodigy, setting herself apart not just as a participant, but as a legend in the making. And truth be told, she didn't much care for it, at least not nearly as much as the look of pure shock on Sebastian's face. The only real reward for all of Cass's effort, she lifted her chin, her eyes meeting his. In this light, his irises were green, wide with surprise, resentment, and anger. But there was also a hint of something new, something dangerously close to admiration that went straight to Cass's head, making her feel dizzy with pride. Her heart beat wildly against her ribcage, and little did she know she'd grow rather addicted to this feeling, though. Unfortunately for her, nothing but Sebastian's admiring gaze could procure it to her. For Cass is 13 when she wins her first fight against an older beta wolf from her past ATT. In a fight, she is an aggressive fighter, a force to be reckoned with, and despite how young she is still, she's confident she'll only grow stronger. She now wears her hair tightly back into a severe braid, one that she hates taking down even when in the shower, for it still hurts that her hair hasn't grown back to its full length. Her father has started pitting her and her twin brother Ronan against each other, testing their abilities. He hasn't said anything outright, but Cast knows he's trying to determine which one of them will be best suited to become alpha, a decision he wouldn't be making before they've reached their 18th birthday, though there is no doubt in Cass's mind that she will be the victor. She'll accept nothing less for across the woods where Sebastian's pack reside. It is already looking like he'll become the next alpha, and if Sebastian is to be an alpha, then so is Cass, for it would likely kill her to be less than him. He'd never admire her again, if she isn't his equal at the very least, if not better than him in every way. And then what could possibly be her reason for confronting him any longer if she wasn't his rival? Though she hasn't had much luck with defeating him at anything these days, Cass may have bested an older male in a fight, and she may get the upper hand on her brother over and over again. But Sebastian is a different story. The two of them have taken to sneaking into the woods at night to hunt or fight ever since Cass's triumph. 2 years ago, it's just the two of them. Their competition has outgrown the need to bring other members of their pack into this. The others don't matter, but what used to be somewhat closely tied brawls, from which a victory wasn't easily discernible, has started to shift. Cass may be tall for her age, but she is lean and slim, with baby fat sticking to her cheeks. Still, Sebastian, on the other hand, is a teenager. Now he's getting taller and broader, his muscles growing, fuller and more defined with each passing day, and honing a newfound strength cast. Sometimes feels coursing beneath her fingers when their body collide in battle. It's getting easier for him to twist her arms to pin her down or against a tree. His hazel eyes gleaming with satisfaction, she fears that soon he'll grow bored of her when Cass simply won't make of a notable adversary any longer. Cass's father is always telling her that you're only worth what you can do, so she tells Sebastian about her latest victory between one hit and the next. He taunts that others are surely letting her win, for her skills are lacking and her technique barely passable. "You're the one holding back your punches," Cass retorts, because she isn't a fool. She hates him for holding back. She hates him for having Brad her shoulders while she is stuck at the very early stages of puberty, as lean as ever, without the hint of a curve having appeared. Not that it's breasts or hips she's after. They wouldn't do her much good in a fight. It's the height and strength that'll come with age that she's craving for, if the gap in stature between her and Sebastian has become too pronounced. It is unacceptable that he tries to shield her from it. Cass has never felt as small and inconsequential. If anything, at least try to hide better. She sneers, making him fall down with a well-placed swipe of her leg. "If you're not going to fight me, then don't waste my time." She rolls them over, straddling Sebastian and pinning him to the ground in a move. She's not quite sure how she manages. Sebastian is blinking at her, confusion and surprise marking his features as Cass stares down, not believing her own luck. Her thighs are tight around Sebastian's, her hands holding onto his shoulders. A faint, though fascinating blush begins to spread across her adversary's cheekbones. Cass's fingers loosen somewhat against the fabric of his shirt, for she is distracted by how dark Sebastian's gaze becomes dark, with something she cannot name. It's a new sort of gaze, not so different from the somewhat admiring ones she'd received from time to time for her efforts in the past, but also entirely new. Nonetheless, Sebastian is holding himself still, except for the quick rise and fall of his chest. His mouth is partially opened as he breathes heavily. Cass's mouth is very dry and her throat very tight. She isn't sure why exactly. Perhaps the change in Sebastian's scent, it's spiking up dangerously, thickening around her, making everything feel oppressively slow, though not entirely unpleasant. Cass can't help but sway forward, though, at the slightest movement. Sebastian flips her over, pinning her to the ground in his stead, using all of his greater body mass to keep her still. "Stop moving." He groans against her neck. "You stop moving." Cass replies, rather lamely, her words coming out much more whiny than expected, and then she feels the graze of Sebastian's teeth against her neck. Cass's eyes widen in disbelief, and she grabs onto his hair to move him away. "Get off me!" she growls, genuine fear clawing at her senses. Sebastian complies with her demand, moving swiftly, like he's been burned. "Were you about to, Cass?" Can't bring herself to say the words. He couldn't have been about to bite her. Right, she may be only 13, but she knows what a bite mark entails. A claiming of sorts. A total act of dominance, one only acceptable if done with the intention to mate. The thought makes Cassandra's head spin, torn between fear, shame and strange disappointment when Sebastian protests vehemently. Of course not. He says this as the mere idea appalls him, which good Cass has no desire to be mated at 13, least of all to Sebastian of all people. "But I scared you," Sebastian murmurs, looking suddenly so regretful you'd think Cass were something fragile to be looked after. Humiliation burns bright inside her stomach. "Shut up," she snaps quickly, drying away tears she hadn't noticed until now. She gets to her feet in one swift movement and runs off the next night. Sebastian doesn't show up at their meeting place. They don't see much of each other after this for a while. Cass is 15 when she sees Sebastian again. Well, that's not entirely true. She'd seen him in passing the last 2 years. There just hadn't been any words properly exchanged between them. A couple of insults or mean-spirited jabs here and there. Yes, but even that was pretty tame compared to the more physical fights they used to engage in, though his absence and growing indifference have been slowly driving Cass insane, so much so that she'd started dreaming of him at night. Dreams that unfortunately stuck with her when she'd wake in the early hours of the morning, breathless and panting. She dreams of meeting in the forest, of fighting him and besting him, of finding that admiration in his gaze once more, and then, in almost every dream, Sebastian bites her in the neck, prompting Cass to wake up in a startled gasp. Memories of his teeth against her skin, real sensations mixed with more imagined versions of the event, haunt her during the day to the point where she sometimes thinks of nothing else. She wants to be rid of these dreams. She doesn't want them, and she can't think of any solutions to make it happen. Beside, perhaps, magic. "Could you take my dreams away?" she'd asked the magician this time. I'd been present when she'd asked, confused as to what type of nightmares could plague a 15-year-old's dreams, to the point where she'd been desperate enough to make a life-ruining wish to take my teenagers. Adrian had commented when I'd raised the subject with him later on. Cass having long departed the shop, so dramatic, though that isn't what he told Cass, reflect unconscious feelings or thoughts. The best way to get rid of them is to confront them. How Cass had snapped, crossing her arms. She was young still, but quite impressive, a force of nature. I wouldn't have liked to reckon with Adrian, found her highly amusing Iris. "What do you dream about?" he then asked me, roping me in their conversation. "My father mostly," I'd replied honestly. For Cassandra, Hargrove's presence was so imposing and oppressive that I'd found myself eager for her to leave. She wasn't the first shifter I'd ever encountered, but she was certainly a powerful one, that was for sure. "Your father," she pressed with a raise of her eyebrows. "He died recently." I explained a dream of seeing him again, of him being alive. Cassad ped slightly as she processed my words, nodded her head curtly, and left a bright blush gracing her cheeks. Unknown to me, my words had struck a sensitive chord, for it had made Cass realize confronting Sebastian for what he'd almost done that night in the woods was something she desired, perhaps even needed, and it terrified her, which is why she doesn't dare approach or meet his eyes when she sees him. Next, the setting is a leg on which a gathering is being held late into the night, and by gathering, Cass is no fool. She knows this is going to be a full-blown party. She doesn't tend to go out much. She's too busy training, and when she isn't training, following her father to different meetings, negotiations and planning, all regarding pack duties. The little time she has left for herself is spent on her education, which she receives from home like most other teens of the pack. If Cass doesn't go out much, neither does her brother, but he's been invited by a friend from an allied pack which has settled a couple hours' drive from their own, and Ronan, Cass's brother, being very much into said friend, there was simply no chance of him missing on the chance to meet up with her far away from adult supervision. "Cass," he told her, "I'm telling you, this is it. Kylie's my mate, I know it." Cass had rolled her eyes, perfectly uninterested in mates and all the drama that went with looking for one, especially at their age, in her opinion. Finding a mate had more to do with securing a strategic match that would profit the pack than finding someone attractive. Their father had made it clear he would allow nothing less for his children, one of which was their future. Alpha Ronan was a fool if he thought Kaylee would suit his father's business objectives despite it, though her brother's hopeful looks and enthusiastic grins had roped her in along with a couple more friends from the pack into accompanying him for moral support. All 6 teens had fled their bed late into the evening to drive off unnoticed to the lake. What they hadn't been expecting was that Kyle's pack had friends from another pack. Themselves were good friends with Sebastian's pack, who'd been invited to join in the celebration. Sebastian is even taller and broader than before, being almost 18 now, and apparently attractive if all the looks he's receiving from different girls are any indications. Cass doesn't know what they see in him personally. He has perfectly average hazel eyes that turn a warm green depending on the light, but she's seen much nicer eyes somewhere. Sometimes certainly he is well built, but so are most young men his age, and his brown hair is as messy as when they were young. Maybe it's his smile. He flashes a sort of lopsided grin at people. He likes not so much at Cass, that bears a hint of mischief. Sure, that aggravates her, but perhaps other girls interpret his smiles as flirtations, a hint of something more. Cass frowns at the idea, which she deems unacceptable, as soon as it crosses her mind, and decides not to dwell on. Maybe it's his light freckles. Sebastian Sachs has freckles. Jess, one of Cass's good friends, asks when she shares her thoughts with her. I hadn't even noticed. Cass rolls her eyes because how would anyone miss any of Sebastian's freckles, mostly located on the bridge of his nose? She has no idea. No, she decides, watching him walk around to fetch himself a beer, joking at a comment. Another makes it isn't about his looks. If people stare, it's because of the confidence he exudes, the way he carries himself and speaks. Already laced with the effortless authority befitting an alpha, a quiet dominance everyone around the lake instinctively recognizes that night. Cass dreams that she is back by the lake, but this time it is her. Everyone stares at her that is the subject of their admiration, and her that holds her head high in dominance, for she too is a future Alpha. Sebastian is among the crowd subjected to her authority, like every other, except it is him, and his subjugation makes Cass's wolf PR with so much pride that she wakes up feeling all-powerful and liberating in control. She knows what she needs to do. She's matched Sebastian's strategic skills as a child. She now needs to match his social skills as a teen. Maybe then he'll stop treating her like a youngling and see her for the rival. She is once more a rival he'd never dare put his teeth upon again. A 6 Cass is about to turn 16 when she enacts her plan a couple of weeks after seeing Sebastian charm everyone around a campfire on the lake's shore. The night is one for another party, though this time it's being held in a club. One Cass has no trouble getting into, for if she'll be turning 16 in only a couple hours, she doesn't look it. Cassandra is tall with long, well-shaped legs, and with enough makeup can easily pass for a young adult. She is pretty enough, she knows, maybe not the most beautiful young woman in the pack, for her features are perhaps too cutting and lacking a softer, more feminine edge to fully earn her the title, but she has nice full lips, dark grey eyes, and most importantly, a body. She's caught practically every single member of her pack staring at more than once. She is satisfied with the amount of lingering looks she receives when she gets to the club, growing more and more insistent as she starts to dance, her brother a little less so, for it makes him feel uncomfortable, but that's his problem. She's stuck between 2 boys, both slightly older than her, though Cass has no doubt she'd easily best them should they try anything, and so feels nothing but ease when her eyes meet Sebastian's as he's getting a drink from the bar. His eyes widen slightly before his mouth purses into a grim line. The hint of a frown grazes his features, and his body twitches imperceptibly, like he's going to walk over to her. Cass's heartbeat picks up expectantly, but then one of Sebastian's friends, a wolf from Kay's pack she's seen before, lightly punches his shoulder, diverting his attention. The next thing Cass knows, they're walking off to join a small group seated in a booth. Cass's heart sinks in consternation, humiliation coloring her cheeks. That's it. That's all she gets for her efforts. Barely a glance from her rival, only marked with slight irritation, instead of the full-blown Alcee-consuming anger she's been used to growing up. This won't do, not in a million years, if Sebastian thinks he's better than her and her pack, now to the point where he won't even entertain their rivalry. Then Cass has to remind him who he's dealing with. She observes him discreetly, the way he seems at ease with this other wolf from Kyle's pack, the one that dared steal away his attention. They seem like they're good friends, apparently. This friend is more interesting than she is. Well, then the second Sebastian's little buddy walks away from the group, heading towards the bar again. She makes her way over there too, casually settling her body close to her targets. It isn't long before he sees her, his sense spiking up with an obvious interest that makes Cass wants to roll her eyes. "Hey, I've seen you before." I think he greets her rather lamely. "I'm Peter." Cass doesn't know what Sebastian sees in someone so ineloquent, but whatever, I don't think so. "I'd remember," she says, giving him a wink that thickens the syrupy desire, lacing his scent even further. "This might be kind of forward, and you can totally say no. But can I get you a beer?" Peter asks, eyes stuck on Cass's lips. "I don't want a beer," she replies, granting him a small smile that makes Peter flush. "Maybe a cocktail?" Cass shakes her head, batting her eyelashes at him subtly. "A glass of wine?" Peter asks, sounding slightly breathless. Cass laughs, bringing her lips against his right ear. "How about we go somewhere quiet instead?" she murmurs against the skin. Peter isn't Cass's first kiss, and he isn't her worst. Just like all the other kisses she'd received before, she didn't care much for it, but at least he wasn't forcing his tongue down her throat. So really, it could be worse. That said, Cass hasn't got all night, so she's carefully angling their bodies right in front of Sebastian's booth, and not even a minute later, there is no mistaking the sudden but powerful surge of anger that cloys Sebastian's familiar scent, even from where Cass is standing, that cloys Sebastian's familiar scent, even from where Cass is standing. The angry, spicy tinge only grows stronger as he undoubtedly walks over to the point where it fills Cass's nose and clouds her mind. Just as Peter deepens their kiss, a small, embarrassing whine escapes from her, definitely caused by the kiss, which she is absolutely more focused on than Sebastian's overpowering scent. "Get off her!" Sebastian snaps, pulling Peter away so abruptly that his friend loses his balance and would have fallen down if not for the pillar towering behind him. His face is twisted in a sneer, his body taut with tension, but he isn't looking at Cass. This makes her want to scream, "What the hell, man?" Peter asks, eyes widening in shock. What is your problem?" "My problem?" Sebastian looks inches from throwing in a punch. "She's 16 years old. You think it's fine?" Taking advantage of a minor, Cass rolls her eyes, holding back a sigh. "I didn't know she was 16. Peter winces, giving Cass a vaguely apologetic glance. "I mean, she doesn't look like she..." He waves a hand at Cass, making Sebastian's anger spiral all the more, which doesn't escape Peter's notice. Wolves know not to anger stronger, more dominant wolves. It's a survival instinct, practically written in their DNAs, and being obviously no match for Sebastian. Peter visibly shrinks, noticing his rival's furious stance. "Sorry, Cass," he tells her, hoping this will appease Sebastian somewhat. It does not. "Don't you?" "To look at her," he growls, pouncing towards Peter, only to be abruptly pulled back by the arm. "Enough," Cass tells him, lacing her words with enough command she knows that'll secure his attention. "I wanted him to kiss me. Leave him alone." Sebastian's jaw clenches in aggression, though this time it is focused solely on Cass. For the first time in 3 years, his gaze is dark and brooding, his posture downright aggressive, and his scent, it goes right to Cass's head. She'd missed this. She realizes, slightly confused at the thought. "Cass," he mutters, breathing through his nose like he's trying to regain his cool. "Can't you smell how much he—" Sebastian is shaking in barely contained anger, and their faces are inches apart, his eyes shining a bright gold. Cass half considers warning him about it, because a human could notice, but she's feeling too good about finally being the focus of his hatred again. "He wanted more than to kiss you," Sebastian mutters, his fingers encircling Cass's arm like a warning that comes off as entirely too possessive. Cass's wolf is practically preening with satisfaction. "I'd be happy to let him mappy pat me." She smiles purposely, crude. Sebastian's grip tightens to the point of pain, and for a brief moment, every instinct in Cass's body warns her of something she can't quite understand. His eyes descend upon her bare neck with a fixated intent and the insane thought that he's about to bite her blooms inside of Cass, whose breath freezes into her lungs. Then Sebastian lets go of her, abruptly walking off, and she's left standing there breathless and dumbfounded. Cass is 16, but she feels 8 again, like that day he'd stuck gum into her hair, and she's mortified to realize she's going to cry. But then he turns back around, walks back to her, and barks our place in the woods tomorrow night. Triumph washes over Cass 7. Cassandra is 17 when her meetings with Sebastian in the woods take a different turn. They barely speak before they come to blows that night. Cass being quick to taunt her rival into throwing the first punch. He's furious with her, she can tell, because she'd succeed in diverting yet another one of his friends' attention. She wants him to know she could divert anyone's attention from him should she put her mind to it. They look at Sebastian only because she allowed it, but should she wish, she could steal that away from him at any given moment. Sebastian is strong, Cass is fast. The two of them skilled fighters that play on the others, weaknesses with instinctual ease honed from years of watching and battling each other. She throws a punch, he parries, he goes for a kick, and she spins their body back into a safer position for her to keep her stance. Their fight is closely tied, and it seems to go on forever, their breath jingling together and echoing. Through the woods, Cass's back is sore from colliding with tree trunks, so often her blood coursing quickly beneath her skin. "I think we're finished here," Sebastian says earlier than expected, when it looks like neither of them will get the upper hand. There's a sort of tired resignation in his eyes that twists Cass's heart, from the fear of what it might mean finished. She growls, lashing out with a quick kick of her leg, which Sebastian easily avoids. The thought of them being finished has her going nearly blind with anger. How come he's still treating her like a youngling to be coddled? She's all grown up now. She matches his skills. Blow for blow, he doesn't have to hold himself back with her. Can't he see they're equals? She screams in rage, throwing herself at Sebastian and toppling the two of them to the ground. They struggle briefly. Their eyes meet, and Cass isn't sure how the kiss begins. Just that she is now grabbing at Sebastian's short hair to deepen it, drinking every moan from his lips like she would water. This is a kiss, unlike any other caste has ever shared, a reclaiming of sorts, forceful and angry. This is a kiss, unlike any other caste has ever shared, a reclaiming of sorts, forceful and angry. Neither of them is worried about its reception. They've both been past the point of hesitation. The second their lips had made contact, sharp teeth are nipping at Cass's lower lip, perhaps growing harsher as Sebastian realizes she can kiss just as deeply as he can. His touch becomes bruising in its ferocity, as if hoping to let Cass know if he isn't her first, then he's to be her best, which she thinks trying to get him closer he most certainly is, though she'd rather die than let him know that she brings her legs up around his waist. Sebastian leaves her mouth to suck burning kisses on her neck, his hands gripping her thighs, His name is torn from her lips in panting moans. His scent mingles with hers, enveloping her in what she's old enough now to identify as desire, thick and syrupy and so good. She can do nothing else but buck into the solid press of his body, rejoicing at the noises he makes as she tightens her arms around his neck. She doesn't protest when he tears away her top or any other article of clothing she's wearing, helping him remove his. In turn, she doesn't protest when his eyes meet hers, searching for permission, and she doesn't protest when a sharp pain courses through her. Shortly after, she encourages it, even fueling Sebastian on with her words and hands and lips, for how could she bring herself to do otherwise when he is looking at her like that, like Cass is everything. Once she is back inside the confines of her room, later alone, under the covers of her bed, only then does regret begin to tighten her throat. They shouldn't have done that. She tells herself what they've done is something that should be kept between mates, or at the very least people who aren't natural. Enemies. Will Sebastian even respect her as a rival, now that he's had her like that? Will he look at her differently? Will he even come back to meet with her tomorrow to fight her as he should? He does come back, and they do fight, though it doesn't last very long. Not with their body pressed so closely together, her S still present on Sebastian's skin, mingling with his, not with the way his eyes flutter shut for a moment, lips parting when he detects his own one imprinted onto Cass. His hands on her, no less gripping, become strained with a different sort of fight. One Cass is unequipped to rebuke, unwilling, even if Sebastian is going to keep looking at her like he'll never look at anything else ever again. The following night, their pretense of a fight is even shorter, and the one after that, they don't even pretend, their lips colliding instantly into a demanding kiss, their hands roaming over each other's bodies, hurried and demanding the simplest of touch, causing Cass to shiver. There's no pain anymore, only pleasure she hadn't thought could exist, and new emotions just as intense and all-consuming as anger, though she doesn't know how to name them every night. Cass comes back home, telling herself this was the last time that they shouldn't be doing what they're doing. But the following day, as soon as the sun sets, she finds herself growing restless, running away to the woods to Sebastian II. She's certain no one will notice, eager for his hands to be on her again, to feel his grip turn punishing when their lips meet again, after being apart for the day. She thinks perhaps after some time the novelty of this experience will fade, and with it any desire on her part for it to continue. She doesn't dare think of how it would make her feel, should it dull on Sebastian's end. She cannot, will not think of that, for once it does. What will she become? Adrian isn't in the shop. The next time Cass comes to visit, I'm alone going through books distractedly when she enters, eyes wild with something I don't understand. When will he be back? She mutters, closing her eyes in resignation when I tell her he's gone off somewhere, for God knows how long I need him to free me of this insanity. She seems distressed, fevered almost, as she begins to pace around the shop like a beast trapped in a cage. What did you want him to do exactly? I asked, hoping to deter her, just as I've seen Adrian manage to accomplish a couple of times before. Now I want to be rid of my Cass. Can't bring herself to say the words, and falls quiet heat grazing her features. Never mind, she says. 8. Eventually Cass is 18, when fights between members of her pack and Sebastian. Later she cannot even remember what started it. She'd been with her brother and other pack mates, hanging out in a bar. One of them, a male named Finn, whom she grew up with and is close to, teases her about something, putting an arm around her shoulders, a familiar gesture she's used to, and thinks nothing of, in fact. Perhaps he hadn't even done it, she thinks to herself, lying in her bed. Perhaps that had been yesterday or the day before. She knows in the back of her mind that Sebastian is here somewhere in the bar. She hasn't seen him, but she recognizes his scent, and has seen a couple of wolves from his pack roaming the place, hoarding the pool table. They've been at it for hours. Finn complains to Ronan, who just shrugs good-naturedly. Unlike Cass, her brother isn't one for conflict. We could ask them to join in on the game. He suggests making everyone groan around their table, what Ronan insists giving Cass a firm glance. Aren't we past all the petty squabbles from before, come on? Reluctantly, Finn follows him towards the pool table, briefly squeezing Cass's shoulder as he passes her. She exchanges a joke or two with the remaining members of the group, takes her sip of her beer, and then a loud crashing noise diverts her attention to the back of the bar. She sees Finn gripping at Sebastian's shirt, sneering at him as he backs him up against a wall, his scent, furious and menacing. Cass is on her feet, getting between the two in an instant. "What are you doing?" she barks at Finn. "He smells like you," her packmate replies to her great horror. "Why does he smell like you?" Cass's eyes briefly meet Sebastian. He looks like he's about to reply when she cuts him short. "We met briefly behind the bar. We had a little squabble." That's all she gets out quickly, avoiding Sebastian's gaze. Obviously, that is not what happened if he smells like her. It's because they were together the night before and all the ones before that. Ronan frowns, suddenly looking so aggressive. Even Cass is stunned by it. It isn't like him to display so much aggression, but the idea of his sister having been attacked awakens his protective instincts. Ronan might hate conflict, but he's nothing if not protective. "You attacked her alone," he spits furiously. "Are you insane? You're an alpha. Now you could have heard her." "No, he couldn't." Cass protests, though. Ronan ignores her, pushing Sebastian back, when the latter tries to explain himself, sending her an annoyed glance. "We didn't fight," he begins. Cass's heart freezes in her chest at the thought that he could tell his brother and her packmates what it is exactly they'd most likely been doing instead. "Yes, we did," she snaps without thinking. Ronan screams in rage, throwing himself at Sebastian. Immediately one of his friends intercepts him, tackling Ronan to the ground. Even Cass finds herself having to parry a hit coming at her from one of the girls that had been hanging out with Sebastian, swiftly getting her to back off when she notices how many humans are staring at their group with shocked attention that doesn't escape Sebastian's notice either. "Enough," he exclaims, stealing every member of his pack, and to Cass's displeasure, ones from her own too. However, his alpha command isn't enough to deter Ronan. "Stay away from my sister," he growls, pulling Cass after him. She briefly glances back at Sebastian, but he avoids her gaze, making her heart sink. "What were you thinking?" he exclaims when they meet later into the night. "Telling your pack we'd gotten into a fight? Seriously, Cass? What else was I supposed to say? Finn smelled me on you. What if he'd realized? What then?" Sebastian sneers, turning away. "It wouldn't have been worse than them thinking an alpha had attacked you alone." Heat burning her cheeks, Cass stomps her feet on the ground, feeling utterly powerless. "And why not? I could take you." "You know I could." Sebastian's eyes are furious when they settle on her. "It doesn't matter. I'm the leader now. Can't just be picking fights with random wolves, especially not ones from a pack that doesn't get along with mine. I'm not a random wolf." Cass screeches, pushing his shoulders aggressively. "You know what I mean." Sebastian Ritor works with a grimace. "Do I?" Cass says, unable to hold back the hurt tampering with her words. Sebastian's gaze softens briefly before he purses his lips in resolve. "Cass, you're the one that panicked at the idea of everyone finding out about us, not me," he says with a helpless shrug. "What am I supposed to think? Especially when you let all these other wolves touch you right in front of me. There is no us. You and I aren't together, Sebastian." She protests, heart in her throat, panic clenching her gut. "I can do what I want with whoever I..." Sebastian grips her jaw forcefully, making her wise and forcing her eyes to meet his own. They've turned gold, betraying his anger. "You're mine," he growls. I'm not Cass. Snaps, batting his hand away. He catches hers between his fingers anyway, pulling her to him more carefully. You could be, he says, sagging his forehead against her softly. I want you to be Cassa. Cass's heart does something complicated, like a piece of it is suddenly going missing, pulled from her by force and perfectly against her will to fly right into Sebastian's hands. Is this a trick? He just said she was a random wolf throwing his title in her face, like it's supposed to matter. She's going to be an alpha too. Doesn't that count for something? She's not his to claim for. What would it mean for her? If he did, her father would never accept it. Her father is going to choose her. Her father is counting on. Why would Sebastian say this only now, and not the day before, when he'd held her in his arms, or all the ones before that, when he'd had plenty of occasions? Don't she, snaps, pulling away, throat tight. We're nothing. You're nothing to me. Sebastian pales, searches her face, and looks like he wants to pull her back towards him. Cass finds herself kind of wishing he would fine. He spits, turning around abruptly and walking away. Cass thinks of calling after him, her mouth opening on its own accord, but nothing comes past her lips. Is this it, the moment when he grows tired of her? The next day, Sebastian answers her father's call to discuss the altercation from the bar and apologizes for approaching Cass, swearing it won't happen again. It doesn't. 9. Cass is 20 when her father lets her and her brother know he's decided to make her alpha. It is everything she's ever wanted and worked all her life for, and she'd pictured this moment in her head many times growing up, imagining the pride and joy she'd feel upon hearing the words she hadn't expected to feel nothing at all. She'd felt numb and empty ever since that night Sebastian has walked away from her, but she'd managed to keep her head above water, convincing herself it would all be worth it when she'd finally become alpha. Once she'd reached this goal, then surely Sebastian would, but Cass wasn't sure what she expected him to do anymore. What did she even want him to do? All she knew was that his absence was unbearable, its weight clawing more and more at her heart with each passing day. And that very morning she'd learned of his engagement. He was to be Emmett to a girl from another pack. Soon Cass barely remembered what she'd looked like. That other girl, she'd never paid her much attention. She was the daughter of an alpha and came from an influent pack. She was somewhat pretty. What else could she fight with Sebastian, like Cass could? Could she beat him in a hunt? Could she make love to him, as well as Cass learn his body and what he loved, the way she had? Would she take care of him and make him happy? Cass, her father, asks tentatively, because Cass realizes she hasn't said a word. Ronan is also looking at her, curiously surprised at not seeing her joy at finally achieving her dreams. "Thank you, Father," she mumbles, lowering her head. "I'm honored. I won't let you down." She wants to cry. She should be happy. Why isn't she happy? Cass will be alpha, but I'd like to entrust you with something important too. Ronan, their father pursues, though not without sending a couple of wary glances towards Cass. He gets up, reaches for a book in his library, and lowering it unlocks a small safe hidden behind the confines of the bookcase. From it their father pulls a dagger covered with a protective sheath. "This dagger I trust Ronan to make use of. Their father says it's a powerful weapon that goes back generations in our family, and one of the artifacts often being renegotiated in our dwellings with Alpha Sebastian's pack." Cast tenses at the name, making Ronan frown, though he quickly averts his gaze back to their father. "Be careful with it, son, as this dagger has the power to kill any wolf with only one prick of the skin. It's laced with a powerful poison, conceived for the very purpose. Our ancestors used it in many battles. I trust you to keep it safe." Ronan nods seriously, though Cass pays no mind to any of it. As you both know, Sebastian will be taking the daughter of a powerful alpha as his mate, which he claims won't affect his judgment when it comes to making alliances, but which we all know most definitely will. Their fathers conclude grimly, "You'll have a lot of work on your hands to make sure our pack thrives as much as theirs and doesn't succumb to the influence of another." Her father's words ring in Cass's head as she heads to bed, though not the part about her being Alpha or Ronin, about receiving a weapon powerful for one reason or another. She doesn't care that they'll have a lot of work in the upcoming years. All that she cares about is figuring out if Sebastian loves his mate to be or not. They are all invited to the engagement party, which takes place in his home. 2 days later, Cass wears her most beautiful dress and arranges her hair in a sophisticated updo that leaves her long neck bare, hoping that if anything, Sebastian will at least think back on their time together once tonight and feel, if not as much regret as she does, then at least something. But it is her who stares at him across the reception hall all night, dancing with his fiancée, making speeches or jokes that have everyone's attention. He doesn't look at her once. Cass feels something die inside of her, crippling even further with each glance. Sebastian denies her, breathless. With every touch he gives another, crippling even further with each glance. Sebastian denies her, breathless. With every touch he gives another, his finger on the back of this girl's dress, his lips whispering in her ears. What could he be telling her? But words of love. Words maybe Cass could have heard if only she'd been better and stronger and more interesting. If only she hadn't been born as part of the pack he'd been set to despise, and she into one set to hate them in return, when it's getting late enough that she can't delay going to greet the happy couple any longer. Cass forces her body to move, though it feels like it's been draped in lead rather than red silk. Sebastian is busy, whispering something into his fiancée's ears that eyes her, eyes sparkling in pleasure. It shakes something loose from Cass's chest. "Hello," she greets them, embarrassed at how weighted and dull her voice sounds. "On behalf of all my pack, I would like to congratulate you on your engagement." The fiancé smiles brightly at her offering. Cass' warm thanks laced with a happiness that is unbearable to witness, knowing what has caused it. Besides her, Sebastian's posture is relaxed, his face stern in perfect cool indifference as he politely inclines his head at Cass. "Thank you," he replies curtly before moving his fiancée away for a dance. Cass is left standing there, mouth close to gaping at the normality of this exchange. She had expected disdain, or at least some form of dislike. How dare Sebastian act like they're strangers, like everything between them could simply be ignored as a mere detail from the past, instead of the fostering wound that it is still very much to cast. She grins and bears the humiliation with a strength she's been well taught, but which almost fails her too many times to count, until she cannot bear it any longer, and runs inside a nearby library to save herself from feeling so much pain, if only for a short while there. She exhales a long, painful breath, closing her eyes briefly, hoping to regain her bearings, and even better, think of a good excuse to leave this party early, without looking like a complete and utter the noise of a door closing shut. Snaps her eyes back open onto Sebastian's silhouette entering the library, eyes searching and most importantly alone. "What are you doing here?" She asks before she can think of something better to say. "What am I doing here at my house?" Sebastian replies curtly. Cassandra says nothing, turning her head to look at a row of books beside her in perfect silence. She may have stared at Sebastian all evening, but now in the privacy of this room, with nothing and no one between them and what lies there, she finds herself unable to look him in the eye. "I should be asking you that." Sebastian taunts, humor and something darker lacing his words. "It isn't like you to hide away from a crowd." Cass can't help but flinch. "My father chose me to be our next alpha," she replies, swaying the title like a shield aimed to defend, though what she cannot say. Sebastian's full lips curl into the mockery of a smile. "Well, congratulations." Then he says, shrugging his shoulders, "It's everything you've always wanted, isn't it?" Cass shoots him a dark look, which Sebastian returns tenfold. Don't act like this hasn't been your goal either, she says, chin raised up. You can't blame me for I don't blame you. Sebastian interrupts his mouth in a tight line. Cass knows the feel of this mouth against her own. Her stomach plummets at the thought of never knowing it again. Then, what is this? She forces herself to say, why did you follow me here? Have you come to gloat? Sebastian's expression does something complicated. There are many things Cass wants to say, all of them at the tip of her tongue. But then Sebastian shakes his head. Turning away, have a good evening, Cassandra. I'll see you at the next Alpha meeting. Yeah. He turns back to the door and is about to leave when it's all Cass can do not to blurt out what she ends up blurting out anyway. Do you love her? She hears herself ask with such desperation, she barely recognizes herself. Sebastian's shoulders visibly tense as he freezes in his tracks. Do I love her? He asks, turning back around, a sneer twisting his features. Isn't that obvious? I'm marrying her, aren't I? Cass feels like she's been slapped even more so, under the intense scrutiny of his gaze, one she searched for her entire life, but that she's suddenly unable to withstand. All right. Well, then I'm happy for you, she murmurs. Are you? Sebastian scoffs. What's it to you how I feel anyway? We were never anything to each other. You've made that abundantly clear. The words are designed to hurt, and they do, hitting against all of Cass's defenses with a precision that leaves her shaking. So now you're going to act like there was never anything between us. Then she shakes her head, hurt, lacing her words. If that's how it's going to be, then go. I have nothing to say. You're the one that always acted like it was nothing, like it embarrassed you to be with me. Sebastian barks. He is inches from her. Now, how did he get so close so quickly? Cass's mind is spinning from getting such a strong whiff of his scent so close and so angry. I don't remember you pouring out your feelings at every chance either. She argues some fight left in her still, though it's that of an animal trapped in a corner. I was the one that always had to earn your attention. Some way or another earn my attention. There's hardly any inflection in his voice at all. You didn't earn anything. You always had it. I've always looked at you. Always, ever since we were young. No, you didn't. You'd look, but you wouldn't see me. Cass argues desperate. I've watched, seen and thought only of you for as long as I can remember. Sebastian growls disgust, lacing his words like he cannot stand them and must get rid of them. But I'm done now, it's over. His voice is mean and scathing and stirs something in Cass. She raises her hand to wipe her eyes, because she's crying. She doesn't remember when it started. It'll never be over. She tells him darkly, you know it, and I know it. And before Sebastian can reply, she grabs his face and their mouths collapse into a bruising kiss, an even harsher version of the ones they'd used to share Sebastian's teeth and tongue, laying claim to Cass immediately. She sigh into it, giving ground and allowing him further in. She wants to give him everything, everything he could ask for. His scent is flaring with hunger, one of his hands gliding to the small of her back, the other twisting into her hair, pulling back the pins that had been keeping it in place. Long, heavy blonde curls fall onto her shoulders, which Sebastian grabs and stares at in awe before burying his nose in two. I want nothing to do with you. He sighs, eyes closing shut as he breathes her in. I love you, she replies, choking on her next words when she sees him. Flinch, like she's just him, no. He says, stepping away, refusing to meet her gaze enough. Her mouth opens, tries to hold on to him, but he flew the room without, looking back, leaving her alone and feeling as exposed and alone as ever. Later she goes to the magician's shop, though she realizes it is closed, and for good reason, as the time nears midnight. She doesn't know it, but she'll be making her wish the very next day. 10. Cass is still 20 when she wakes up in her bed in the early hours of the morning, surprised and confused at the feel of wet lips sucking bruises on her neck. She's rather certain she fell asleep alone and should feel fear and distress at the type of wake-up call she's been subjected to, but she feels nothing but warmth and hazy pleasure that is building into something more heated. With every second, a familiar scent is enveloping her, mixing with hers in a way she hasn't experienced in years, but has only craved. All the more, she becomes aware of the hard press of a body against hers, of hands gripping her hips. But the touch feels so natural and right, she doesn't even think about moving. "Away, Sebastian," she asks breathlessly, feeling him smile against her neck. She meets his eyes through the darkness, is blown wide, dark with desire and something else she cannot place immediately. "What are you doing here?" she asks hesitantly, grazing his cheek with her fingers. Despite it being unwise, him being here, uninvited in the middle of the night, she doesn't want him to think his presence is unwelcome, or worse, to see him leave should she say the wrong thing. Her mind is still hazy with sleep, and she should probably be more rational about their situation, but she didn't think she'd be seeing him again so soon, and certainly not in this context, not with him pulling her towards him, claiming her mouth into a slow though desperately heated kiss. The press of his tongue against her own has her moaning in delight, though the taste of it makes her pull back. "In surprise you've been drinking," she accuses, puzzlement twisting her features. Maybe he laughed, snuggling her neck. "I was celebrating my engagement, remember?" Cass runs her fingers through his hair, inhaling his scent briefly as she builds up the courage to push him off of her, as she should about that engagement. She says somewhat reluctantly, especially when she feels Sebastian's hands roaming her bare leg, "Shouldn't you be with your fiancé instead of here?" Sebastian mutters something incoherent against her skin that has Cass rolling her eyes, forcing him to back away by grab. He asks again. "I said I don't have a fiancé," he replies, looking very much like he's about to kiss her again. "I broke off our engagement." He moves to lower his mouth back onto hers, but Cass moves away, making him groan. "What, why?" she asks, searching his gaze. It is loving, though dazed and hazy with intoxication, didn't want her. He replies, grinding down against Cass and making her gasp. "Sebastian," she protests with a frown. "You said you loved me," he complains, mouthing the words against her lips. "How could I, another when you love me?" He bends down to leave a trail of kisses on her collarbone, and she gasps, both from his words and his touch, forgetting all about being too loud for a short moment. Tears welling her eyes. "I thought you wanted nothing to do with me." She protests, though without much force. "Say that you love me again," Sebastian replies, eyes crazed with pent-up desire. "Say it again, Cass, please." She cradles his face between her hands. "I love you," she murmurs, meeting his gaze, watching his pupils dilate even further with pleased satisfaction. She'd always needed him to look at her. Her entire life had been about making sure he'd look only at her, his teeth grey at her skin, dangerously. Cass's scent spikes up in response, which Sebastian doesn't fail to notice, his ministrations becoming all the more pressing. "Cass," he eyes, as she pulls him back for a kiss. "I can't do this anymore. I love you. I need you." She nods against his shoulder, unable to stop herself from pulling him closer. "Then you shall have me," she tells him, bucking up against him despite herself. "Just maybe not right now in my parents' house while you're drunk." But he only starts pulling at her nightgown more urgently, apparently stuck on the first part of her sentence rather than the second. "I've been going wild thinking of you tonight." Sebastian insists, pinning her now naked body into the mattress. "Tonight, every night, all the time." He claims her mouth again, moaning when it's Cass's tongue which nibs at his own first. It feels so right. Being one with him again, his fingers feel scorching his scent, wild and dizzying, to the point where she wonders if she isn't the one who's been drinking. She must be, for when she feels his teeth against her neck, she pushes his head down harder, urging him on. She wants him to claim her. She realizes she wants to be his mate and claim him in return. But she thinks to herself, a little belatedly, not like this, when he's not himself. Sebastian, she gasps, her toes curling in pleasure at the increasing pressure on her neck. Don't please stop, though. She says this, only bearing her neck to him further. Her mind saying no, but her body already giving in his teeth sink into her skin and cast screams. The next thing she knows, her own brother's scream joins hers, and suddenly Sebastian is gasping above her features, contorting in pain. Get off her! Ronan yells, appearing in Cassandra's field of vision, stunning her in place. How did he get here? What did he see or hear? She needs to explain. But then Sebastian is sagging against her with another grunt of pain, and trying to get him upright, she realizes something is wrong when her finger feels something wet and warm dripping down his back. Blood, she understands, recognizing the metallic tang of it before she even stares at her own red-colored hands in horror. Cassa, you okay? Ronan asks, fear twisting his features as he tries to remove Sebastian's body from her. Did he force himself? Fear and shock stuns cast silent. She carefully tries to move Sebastian to his side and catch his gaze. He looks stunned, his jaw clenching from the pain of his wound. What did you do? She screeches towards her brother while carefully settling her mate's head onto her knees. Cass, he forced himself on you, Ronan replies, fury lacing his words. I heard you tell him no. Horror fills Cass's heart upon understanding what her brother had assumed, and furthermore when she recognizes the dagger he's holding in his hands and with which he literally stabbed Sebastian in the back. Is that father's? She asks, fearing the answer. Ronan purses his lips, doubt flashing behind his eyes. He was hurting you, he repeats, like he's trying to convince himself he'd done the right thing. No, he wasn't. I love him, Ronan Sebastian, and I have been lovers for years. Her brother's eyes widen, but she forgets about him for a moment when Sebastian gasps out her name, grabbing onto her wrist weakly. God, he murmurs, losing consciousness. She shushes him hurriedly, running her hand through his hair. Stay with me, don't fall asleep, she begs him, desperation clawing her throat when he grunts, his eyelids fluttering shut. Her eyes meet her brother's, and in his own she can read the accusations, fear and interrogations. But they're not twins for nothing, and he knows now not the time for that. I'm going to go get father, he exclaims, jumping to his feet. Cassandra would make her wish in exactly 2 hours, but before that one last conversation would take place. How could you be so foolish, both of you? Their father is unsurprisingly furious when presented with the alpha from their rival pack lying unconscious and half naked in their daughter's bed. How could you let him come here? Cass's father sneers at her before turning to Ronan. And do you using this weapon on him when you could have just thrown him off your sister? I thought. Ronan can't bring himself to say the words shame. Twisting his features, their father rubs a tired hand on his face. This is catastrophic, he says, more to himself than to them. One of you, if not both, are going to have to face consequences. For he waves his hand towards Sebastian's unconscious body, currently being tightly held by Cass. Our pack's reputation is going to take a serious hit, and let's not even get into the monetary damages we'll need to. Are you really talking about money and reputation while he's laying here dying? Cassandra snaps, appalled. Sebastian's face is pale and glistening with feverish sweat. His breathing, labored only sheer will, the desire to keep him alive at all costs, stops her from crumbling down. Is there nothing that can heal him? She asks her father almost reluctantly, for she's afraid to hear the answer. It comes nonetheless, terrible in its finality. None, he says, a slightly more emphatic look, crossing his features. I'm sorry, Cass. Why would you even keep such a dangerous weapon at home? She growls, tears prickling her eyes. Why not bury it? Her father shushes her with a snarl. I keep it to protect my family, he replies, making Cass snarl. Sebastian is like family. She says he's my mate now. Her father's eyes widen in anger. Your mate, how the usual way C sniffs. Kissing Sebastian's forehead when she hears him moan in pain. She watches in disgusted consternation as her father begins to pace the room, the beginning of a plan seemingly forming itself in his mind. We can work with that, he mutters under his breath. Sebastian's an alpha. He forced his way into your room at night, forced himself on you and claimed you. Your brother defended you. I wanted him to claim me, cast protest for IOUs. Well, you'll keep that to yourself if you want. You and your brother to live, her father barked, lacing his words with all the alpha command he could muster, which to his credit a lot. Cass feeling the order freezing her body all the way down her spine. Ronan, come with me. Cass, stay here with him. We'll need to prepare for council meetings and stand for trial if we get a head start and have the PS come to us, instead of waiting for Sebastian's people to confront us. It'll look better. Cass is left alone, faced with her desolation and her Matt's dying breaths. She holds his face against her chest, murmuring comforting words to him in the faint hope that they should reach him somehow and make him hold on a little longer. I'm going to fix this, she tells him. You're going to be okay. I promise. Cass bangs on the magician's front door as the sun barely rises in the sky, begging for him to open up for what feels like hours. In reality, it barely lasts over 5 minutes because I'm a light sleeper and I'm quick to rush down and let her in, please, she begs me, grabbing my hand. We don't have much time. Go get your boss. Normally I wouldn't dare go wake Adrian up under any circumstances for fear of getting cursed or worse, but I know Cass and I know he likes her well enough, so I'm hopeful he'll forgive me for it, when faced with a sheer desperation marking her features. Adrian follows me into the living room a short while later, hair a mess, though it often is, only to be greeted by Cass's terrified, though determined, gaze. This time there'll be no changing my mind, she declares, standing up from her chair and clenching her fingers. You're going to grant me a wish. I don't care what it costs. 11. Cass hasn't aged a day when she comes back to the PAC's headquarters, but she feels like she's become an old woman. Her body is sore and slow, each movement heavy, and difficult colors, smells and sounds all seem different, now dulled, like she's entered a new watered-down dimension, when in which she feels cold quickly, but mostly she feels empty and alone, and barely realizes she's arrived back at the PAC when her brother erupts from their home, waving at her excitedly. Sebastian's awake, he tells her, grabbing her hands. He's fine. Fine. They're discussing what happened with father and the other alphas, but since he isn't sick anymore, it's all going to be. Cass Ronan interrupts himself when he notices his sister's distant, empty gaze. Did you hear me? She's heard him and feels infinitely better, knowing Sebastian is healed, though she had no doubt he would be, since it's what she'd wished for. Cass Ronan insists, grabbing her shoulders. What's with the long face? Are you still angry with me? You can relax, your mate's fine. He isn't my mate, Cass replies, staring down at her feet, which she only realizes now are bare. But I thought you said that was before, Cass says, interrupting Ronan and moving away behind them. Their mother is exiting the house and sprinting towards them. Cassandra. Where have you been? She says when she's reached them. They're asking for you inside. What's this? I hear about you and Sebastian being mates. We're not. Cass replies, tone flat. Their voices sound different now. She thinks it's like when you hear yourself on a film and don't recognize the sound of your voice. It's like that, except with everything. What's wrong? Cass's mother says, taking her face between her hands. What happened, baby? Cass doesn't reply, keeping her eyes firmly down. It's not that she doesn't want to, it's that the words are stuck in her throat. She thinks, maybe if she doesn't say them, it won't be true. Cass, her mother insists, before finally it clicks, and her eyes widen in horror. Her "Oh my God," she exclaimed softly at first, and then more loudly. There's ringing in Cass's ears, and her feet are cold against the grass. Her mother is screaming in horror, and Cass can't bear to meet her eyes. Ronan joins in on her. Mother's questions, she thinks, but she isn't sure. He's probably distressed, for he must have realized by now, she thinks, before she would have known his distress, for it would have pervaded his scent. But Cass can't smell him anymore. She can barely smell anything, and it's so strange and frightening. "Your wishes for your mate to recover?" the magician had asked, eyes growing somber like he'd understood. This time, after so many years, he wouldn't change Cass's mind. "Yes," she'd nodded, tears welling up. "He's dying." Adrian and I had shared a look before he spoke again. "I've told you the rules before. If I grant your wish, I'll have to take what matters most to you." Cassad frowned. "Sebastian is what matters most to me. Does that mean if you save him, you'll only—" Adrian had shaken his head. "They don't take existing people. But if he's what matters most to you." And again, I say if, because you can never know for sure what it'll be. Then what will happen is that you'll probably have to be... he'll be alive, but not with you. Cass's shoulders had sagged. If the choice were to let Sebastian die or resign herself to be apart from him, she'd take the second option. She'd still had hope that somehow they could find their way back to one another. She'd been scared her entire life of not being able to love him freely, but she was done letting that fear control her. She was determined to be with him, do it, save him. She then insisted, "It's what I wish for." Adrian had reached for her hand, closing his eyes, and remained silent for a second. Then he'd let go of it abruptly. "You're with child," he'd said, looking conflicted. What Cassandra had looked taken aback, full of frightened disbelief. She'd remained still and silent for a moment, eyes drifting back and forth through different random areas of the shop. It hasn't been even 24 hours since we've last." She interrupts herself. Realization dawning on her features. "You can feel it?" Adrian had asked, eyeing her carefully. Cassandra had nodded reluctantly. "I think so," she'd reply, "or at least my wolf can. It feels protective already." "What does it mean?" I interrupted. "Is there a risk the wish could harm the child?" Adrian's eyes had looked conflicted for a moment. "I'll tell you what it is. I'll be taking before you make the wish." I gasped in shock, as he'd always sworn to every client I'd ever seen him speak with that knowing in advance what they'd be losing for making their wish was against the rules. "But you said—" I began to protest, losing my words, as Adrian's cold eyes snapped to my face. "It's fine." Cassad looked at us, slightly startled, but too preoccupied with her situation to be deterred. "We don't have much time," she depressed. Adrian grasped her hand again and ped as he shut his eyes to concentrate on his magic. "What matters most to you is being Sebastian's mate," he'd said, making Cass nod like she'd expected as such. "So I'll be making sure you'll never be able to be mates by taking away the very thing that makes it possible." Cass had frozen in place as understanding dawned on her features. "You mean my wolf?" she'd ask eventually in a toneless voice. "You're going to make her human?" I'd summarized more for myself than for Cass. "Yep," Adrian had said as Cass had put her hand on her stomach, looking very much heartbroken. "But my baby, he'll have a wolf, surely?" She'd whispered, eyes brimming with tears. "There's a good chance." "Yes," Adrian had replied. "Gravely, you probably won't be able to raise him." He looked paler than usual, slightly ashen. The result of breaking the rules to tell Cass about what she'd been losing. I'd realized, but kept to myself, for our client had enough on her plate as it was. Cass had closed her eyes, taking a deep though shaking breath. "Do it," she said in a toneless voice. "Grant my wish." Cass hadn't felt her wolf leave her body. 1 minute she could feel it howling painfully against her broken mind. The next it was gone, like it had never been there. It hadn't hurt exactly, But the abrupt dulling of her senses, the uncomfortable physical sensations had made her gasp in shock. But mostly it was this absence, this nothingness in her mind, that had made her sway on her feet and scream. Now she was back with her pack, but she couldn't sense them, guess their emotions through their sense, or know by instinct how to act or react to them. It was frightening, but not as devastating as feeling so alone and broken, like she'd lost not just a limb, but an entire part of herself. "How is this possible?" Ronan asks, searching Cass's face while her mother begins to cry, alerting her father, whose head erupts from the house to check what's going on. "It was the magician," she explains in a toneless voice, "because it doesn't matter now. Now the one who grants wishes and lives in town, you went. To see him, Cassandra doesn't hear, feel, or sense Sebastian's presence immediately, so it's slightly disconcerting when he suddenly enters her field of vision. At first there's a bright, hopeful smile on his face at the sight of her, but it falls immediately when he meets Cass's gaze. "What's wrong?" he asks quickly, making his way to them, followed by another alpha who must have been here to judge what had happened earlier with him. And Ronan, "Did this magician do this to you? Take your wolf?" Ronan asks, looking pale and shocked. "I asked him to," she explains before their brother or father can get it in their head to attack Adrian for what he'd done. "Why would you do that?" Her brother laments. Sebastian reaches them, pushing his weight and taking her face between his hands. "Look at me," he asks her, but she doesn't. It hurts to look at him knowing he'll never be hers now. That's how he healed, her father says, as he sends Sebastian a somber gaze magic. Sebastian ignores him, focused on softly. Asking Cass to look at him again, grazing her cheek with his thumb, she pulls away. "I'd like to be alone now." She tells them she flees before anybody can retort, ignoring the fact with her being human, now they could all easily catch up to her. It probably means something that none of them do. 12. Cass is 21 when Sebastian insists on seeing her. It's been a week since the incident, one during which her birthday has come and gone unnoticed. She doesn't notice much, though she vaguely hears her brother arguing with her lover outside her door. She doesn't want to see anybody, Ronan says, or something along those lines. "I don't care. It's been days. I need to talk to her." Sebastian insists, muttering something else Cass can't make before bursting into her room. Cass is sitting by the window, still hugging her knees, her hair a loose mess against her back. Sebastian widens when they see her, and she thinks she must make a sorry sight with the bags under her eyes and blank, "Cumin smell, Cass." Sebastian says like the words have somehow unlocked his ability to breathe again. He drops to his knees beside her, pulling her in his arms. Cass tells herself not to get used to it. "What are you doing here?" she asks in that dead blank inflection that won't seem to leave her voice. "What do you think?" Sebastian sigh, breathing her in. "Do I smell strange?" She can't help but ask, the tremor of something shaking her words. Sebastian buries his face in her hair. "You smell like you always do, but fainter," he replies cautiously, cast eyes closing her eyes. "It's good that you came," she tells him, feeling his shoulder sag in relief. "I've been wanting to talk to you." Sebastian lets out a startled laugh. "You've been wanting to talk? Is that why everyone's been forcefully keeping me away from you this last week?" Cass ignores his last comment, because if she doesn't speak now, she doesn't think she'll be able to get the words out, even though she's been preparing to say them, repeating them in her mind practically ever since she'd made her wish. "I'm sorry I disrupted your engagement," she says, looking outside her window because she can't bear to look at Sebastian. He laughs again. "Don't be," he begins. But Cass interrupts. "I'm sure if you try hard enough, your mate-to-be will reconsider. And if not, there are plenty of others who—" "What are you talking about?" Sebastian asks, sounding sincerely confused. "You're my mate, I'm no such thing." Cass snaps, feeling like she's choking. "I'm a human now, so what? So, you know as well as I do, that mating bonds don't exist with humans, which was the entire reason why she was human now, though she doesn't tell Sebastian that he remains quiet for a moment, though doesn't let go of her. "Does this bother you?" he finally asks. "That we can't be bonded?" Cass's stomach drops. Is he really so indifferent then about the fact that they can no longer be together? "When I told you I loved you, I meant it," she says, feeling tears welling up in her eyes for the first time in days, like they'd been waiting for him to escape all along. "Or did you think I was just saying this to aggravate you?" Sebastian looks startled and pained. "I meant it too." He quickly intervenes, searching her gaze, gas roll. Her eyes. "You never actually said it," she mutters, hiding her face between her knees. She feels Sebastian put his arms around her once more, his forehead resting against her arm. "I love you too, Cass." He sigh. "I thought it was rather obvious, pretty much the entire world, but you has noticed it hardly matters now." Cass cuts a heavy finality to her words. Sebastian tenses against her, but doesn't let it go. "Why would you say that? It's all that matters to me. At least, are you stupid?" Cassandra snaps. "It was always near impossible for us to love each other, or at least I thought it was, except it wasn't. But now it is." "I'm confused," Sebastian confesses, taking her. Face between her hands, she frowns, wondering if perhaps he really hadn't realized the situation they were in now. "Sebastian, you're a wolf and an alpha wanted that. I'm a human. I can't be your mate. You'll need one if you want to remain the leader of your pack." "I know that," Sebastian replies with a shrug that has Cass wanting to shake him in anger. "I won't be able to live amongst you, let alone be your mate." Sebastian rolls his eyes, putting his hand against her mouth to shut her up. "I already told my pack. I renounce my title. Of course we couldn't possibly live near them, or near yours," he says quickly, adding when he sees Cass's eyes widening, "You really think I'd let my mate live somewhere dangerous? I'm not your mate," Cassandra says, despite the foolish hope blooming in her chest. "You are," Sebastian insists. "Though if you're against that appellation, I hope you'll at least do me the honor of being my wife. I hear humans are perfectly satisfied being husbands and wives instead of mates." Cass shakes her head in disbelief. "Sebastian, you can't. You've worked your entire life to be alpha. I can't let you give it all up for me. Me! You can't let me give it all up." Sebastian looks appalled. "I'm barely giving anything up. You, on the other, gave your wolf for me, Cass, a major part of yourself. If you think for 1 second I wouldn't make a sacrifice infinitely smaller than the one you've made in return, then I'm pregnant," Cass interrupts. Watching his face intently, she'd expect to see it crumble, but Sebastian merely looked surprised for a second before pure joy crosses his features. "You are?" he asks breathlessly. "I may not survive the birth. I won't be able to look after him. Is it mine?" Sebastian asks, eyes wide with disbelief and hope. Cass groan, "Who else's would it be? You? Fool, there's never been any others." So epilogue, Cass is 22 when I see her next. Adrienne has asked me to deliver a baby gift to her, which for some reason he refused to deliver in person, I suspect. He feels guilty for what he'd done to her, even though it was hardly his fault. Just like it was hardly anyone's fault, really. Just a matter of circumstance. He'd done his best to help her, something I hadn't expected of him, having worked for him for a little while now. I knew he didn't much like granting wishes, for that rarely ended well for his clients, but I'd never seen him endanger his health the way he had by breaking the rules so openly, as he had for Cass. He must have been quite fond of her, despite his protests. Cassandra is holding a 4-month-old baby. When I arrive at her home, she is thinner than I remember, looking more frail. But her baby is healthy, and so is her husband, so she seems happy with how things have turned out. "This is a gift from Adrienne," I tell her, handing her a small box. Sebastian looks like he's seriously considering ripping it out of her grasp, but she appeases him with a glance. What is it? A promise from him, I explain, should you or someone from your family need help. Tell them to come to the shop with this ring. Adrian will do whatever he can to help. Could we go now and have him make Casa wolf again? Sebastian asks, 'cause we're days away from giving up our son to her brother for safety, and she may not show it, but it's keeping her awake at night. We already decided we wouldn't risk going back, Cass says, looking at her child resolutely. Unfortunately, this type of request would require you to make a wish. Anyway, I explain, but if there's ever anything else we can do, you've done enough. Sebastian snaps, showing me out. Thank you, Cassandra tells me over her shoulder. Tell him thank you. Her gaze meets mine. Despite everything she does, seem grateful, especially when her eyes settle on Sebastian, whom I think she knows wouldn't be here without Adrian. I wonder if I could ever love someone that much. I asked myself on my way back to the shop, to the point where I'd sacrifice everything. Have you ever been in love? I asked Adrian curiously a couple of hours later while closing the shop. He doesn't reply.